Good morning, cellists. Today we are starting on the second section of the Allemande of the first suite. And for our warm-ups, I might direct you to some of the things that we've already got in the bank there. There are cello hugs, there are swoops, there are waves, there are pizzicato on the left hand. There's a lot of ways you can warm up. But for our new technical digest, always adding into our bank here, I'm just going to suggest a very simple string crossing exercise where we're only looking at the outer two strings on the same bow stroke, like this. The things we're looking at, the angle of the bow is really important, so it needs to cut the string at a right angle. And if you move around to the side of your instrument and really get that right angle where you can see it when you're actually looking at the side here, you'll notice that when you're sitting behind the instrument, it really does look as if you're pointing far too far away from you. But no, you're not. That is absolutely right. We're looking at a flat bow here. Then before halfway, we'll be moving to the upper string. The reason is because, of course, if you take into account the distance between the two strings and you weren't moving at all, you're already losing that much bow. We are moving, so we're going to be losing a lot of bow. So move before halfway in order to make it equal. We've arrived now at the upper string, the A string. Again, flat bow here, and again keeping perpendicular, which in this instance, as we go to the point, will feel like your arm is ridiculously extended, almost straight, in order to create a perpendicular angle here. Similarly on the way back. Before halfway, you drop with the elbow here, really leading the drop. Coming back into heel. Here it is again. An apparently simple thing. It's got quite a lot to think about in there. And its relevance with our Allemande in bar 19. So there we have that very moment of string crossing, a slightly different proportion of the bow on each of those strings, shorter on the C and longer on the A. But it does prepare you for it in a calm and relaxed way where you can really think about exactly how your arm is moving and where the contact of the string is. Now for the left hand techniques today, I thought we would look at an E major arpeggio. This is thinking about our relationships. It is relevant to what we're looking at. The second section of the Allemande is actually going to modulate to A minor. Now that is quite unusual, and he doesn't do that in any of the other movements here. And as I mentioned before, its relationship we can see across our open strings in actual fact. So G is our key, G major. A fifth above is D. D major is the dominant major in G. And a fifth above again is an A. And I've just mentioned we are going to be moving to A minor, so that would be the dominant minor of the dominant of our key. And in terms of where does E fit into this, well, if we went a fifth above, you'd arrive at an E. You can always find that out if you can't sort of work it out in your mind by finding a low A, jump across the string above, a fifth above, and there's the E. So it bears a relevance because Bach will be using the E chord. Put in a seventh there. There's an allusion to the seventh. Yes, he does. He uses E7. So we're going to look at E major and E major, then added seventh for an arpeggio. So standard arpeggio 2 octaves. We're going to start in half position, then move to upper third. Remembering on the way back, we lead with the elbow and we rotate across the strings. This is part of my Valentine's fingering. So from the 4 at the bottom, we then have 1, 4, 2. And again, 1, 4, 2. 1, 4, 14, 14th of the 2nd, 14th of February, Valentine. There's my Valentine's fingering. So very straightforward. Now, if you were slurring, you typically slur in 3s. Lovely and straightforward. You're just changing on the tonic note. Let's do something different. let's actually slur in fours. Whilst you're busy thinking of your fours, your left hand will be left to its own devices. So here we have it: 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Here it is without me counting over the top. It gives a very different flavour to the arpeggio, and it stops your mind breaking it up always on the octave point. And by having to think about 4 notes in the bow, you stop thinking so much about what your left hand is doing. So as well as the different experience, a different viewpoint of the arpeggio, we're actually helping the left hand to just subconsciously move where we want it to move, and you're not going to be thinking about that whilst you're thinking about how many notes to put in your bow. Now let's go straight to E7. So we're just adding in 1 note to this, which is going to be a D natural, and that's our added 7th. Separate bows for the moment. So I'm still exactly the same as I began before. I'm going to put an open D. My E is a second finger still because I'm still in half position. Move as I did before. Now, as we know, the second finger is poised, ready for the E. The first finger is on a G sharp, so it needs to stretch back a displaced semitone. Remember to arrive on the key note, which in this case is A. You can go back down to the E at the bottom, but it's quite nice to relate it to its solution, which is, as I say, the A note, which could be A major or A minor. So once again, to recap, we're adding in a D natural. We're arriving on an A, which could be, or it doesn't matter whether it's A major or minor that we're implying, it just arrived on an A. This one again can be slurred in 4s, which is standard. And it'd be quite nice to just do both the regular arpeggio and the dominant 7th there with 4 notes in a bow. So there's your technical challenge of the day. Now, looking at the Feuillard study that we're considering this week, which is number 10, it is a fairly straightforward one, and as I've discussed before, we're really looking at it about the divisions of the bars. So we've arrived at bar 9, and this time we're going to be doing substitution shifts. So it starts on a 2 because you've had previously a 4th finger on F sharp. We swap immediately for a 4 into half position. Now this is one that's an absolute complete move of the hand. Don't try and telescope back and squish your hand into a different shape. You're going to lose posture and strength. So it's not an appropriate moment to do that. It's just literally a substitution shift where you move the whole hand back. Sorry. Another substitution, we swap to a 1, but the whole hand moves. You see my thumb moves as well. It isn't, you're not trying to just swap fingers like this. It's a whole hand movement. We've arrived half position B, swap for a 1, then stretch out. Don't forget to move your thumb to the floor as well. Stay stretched so that 2 is on the F sharp. Again, another whole hand shift into half position. Another shift with the second finger on the F sharp. And at this latter part, remembering that as you come to the C string, you need a good arm rotation here, and obviously an equal drop on the right arm for the elbow there. So from bar 9 we have this. There it is. Fairly simple, but just looking at clean substitution shifts, moving from second to half position and adding rotation when you come to the C string. Right, let's get on with the Allemande, second section. Now one of the first things you might notice, depending on your edition, but certainly in the Bärenreiter edition, is that they've printed 3 numbers on a 2-note chord. Why? Okay, so there's a 0 on the top above the A. That makes sense. Then underneath the D, there's a 0 and there's a 1. And a 1. Of course, we can play that D in 4th position on the G string. And this is the implication. If you think back to the very beginning of the Allemande, we have a 3-note chord. So he's going to try and mimic it here with 3 notes, but they're only 2 sounding notes, as in 2 pitches, but still 3 strings, like this. So I'm playing 2 Ds before moving to the open A and D at the top of the chord. Don't forget your semiquaver counting. Very easy to become a bit slack and be going, which is not true. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Now let's just have a little look at what's just happened there. All was going fairly straightforwardly until we come to a slightly awkward string crossing and trills coming into the count here. Now, harmonically, we've actually moved to subdominant C by bar 19. So at the beginning of 18, until there, we're just in a straightforward, very happy, easygoing G major bit of scale work. Added in an F natural creates the implication of a G7, which would be the dominant of C, which is exactly where it goes. Now it's important to understand this because then you can understand the trill in bar 19. You would be trilling on an F natural because we have moved into C. And the standard execution of a trill in this era is you will trill from the upper note unless you've just played the upper note, the previous note. So for this trill at 19, you begin on the F. However, if you look at bar 20, where we've got another trill on the G sharp, the note before it is the note above, the A. So in this instance, you will trill from the G sharp up to the A, not but because we've had the A just before it. Okay, you can always rewind that bit of the video if you're not completely sure. So looking back at the area we were focusing on there, the end of 18 into 19, it's quite difficult to get the voices here. So we have 2 voices still. So there's, you can hear in the upper line there, that little sort of D on its own at the end of 18, the high C in 19, and then the second half of bar 19 is the upper voice. But underneath there, we've got it's quite a close conversation here, but we have got a lower voice. Now at the moment, what I've done is I've simplified that trill ornament and the appoggiatura that follows in the next note. They're really like this then, as if they were just semiquavers. It might be worth practicing like that first so that you kind of can feel the pulse of it. The appoggiatura in this instance takes half of the note. It's not an acciaccatura. Yeah, so that's a straightforward solution on that ornament. And if we imagine, then we have now what that rhythm is. The voice, that lower voice continues. So from the end of 18, the lower voice is, and it's helpful to take it apart like that so that you can really understand where the upper notes are in the string crossing. They're the other voice trying to interrupt the conversation. So we have, with the 2 voices, makes a little bit more sense. Otherwise it can sound very jagged. And of course at the very beginning of this class I gave you the bow exercise that you can do as neatly as possible, keeping those angles and rotating right across the string. So we've arrived at this G sharp chord, of trill. And this bar, 20 and into 21, is E7. And it will be arriving at A minor. So all the things that we've been looking at the beginning of the class will bear relevance here, so that your ear can hear where you're going with this E7 chord harmony. He's actually throwing in a little diminished seventh sitting in there as well. It's all in there if you look at the detail. And don't worry, you can just play the notes, but I can just indicate it because it gives it some wonderful depth and of character at this point. It becomes quite mysterious. It's a very long way away from G at this moment. Again, this trill begins on the G sharp because we've had the upper note, the A, just the previous semiquaver. Now, because we're trilling on the G sharp, my first finger is currently occupied on the G sharp, so it would not be advisable to then try and jump to the E with the first finger, but instead use second finger for the E and then put your first finger behind that second finger to get to the B. Let's see those three notes. So it's a little bit of pivot work there. You're on this too, you want to get this first finger really right behind it, so on little points there, the fingers. Sorry. Now in terms of moving into the A minor chord, you might be tempted with the barring. I don't think it will really quite work here. We could try it. You can see that for the last B, I tried a barring. You can do it. I think it does detract a little bit from the ability to draw a very clear line at the top there. You know, by my just trying it out like that, you can hear you just do not get the same pinpoint because you're obviously using a different part of your finger to hold the string to the fingerboard. So I would suggest just a very fast move instead. And I think that's more effective so that we keep the drama of the line at the top rather than worrying about a split second extra preempting of the chord in terms of physical preparation. So what we have so far up until this A minor moment from the second section then is this. And in that demonstration, I hope you could also hear even more of the two voices. So we have as the little side answer there, being a little bit more courteous about their time here than they were at bar 19. Anyway, I hope you enjoy these explorations. Do try the technical preparations because they will help you when you come to the slightly tricky corners in this fragment of the Allemande.